Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, it's a big one. We're all going to be talking about the newest self-titled album from Shawn Mendes. Yep, we're doing this again. So if all you remember the last time I talked about Shawn Mendes in a full review, it didn't quite go so well by any stretch of the imagination. Most because he had taken the promising upbeat Ed Sheeran knockoff tones into the most blandly produced, insufferably written and performed acoustic pop that I have heard this decade thus far. Let me reiterate that for those in the back. Illuminate by Shawn Mendes is not good. It's a bad album, and Treat You Better, the lead-off single, is one of the worst hits of the 2010s, by far the worst hit song of 2016. And yes, I will freely admit that a lot of my disappointment bled into that review, because Shawn Mendes, he had a lot of potential coming out of Handwritten. Hell, so long as he kept consistent momentum on his songs, he could deliver some quality, but doubling down on the tepid, often sour, nice guy with acoustic guitar template was about the worst potential direction he could take for his art. And while a fair amount of that blame lands on Teddy Geiger for the really bland, often insufferable production, ultimately, it was Shawn Mendes who stuck with that artistic direction, and Illuminate paid for it. But then something happened. Maybe this is the success of the tacked on bonus track, There's Nothing Holding Me Back, that actually restored a glimmer of hope that Shawn Mendes could make good music again. Maybe it was a renewed focus on expanding his sound instead of doubling down on the worst tropes of his genre. But Shawn Mendes' newest songs, they were heading in a slicker, more groove-centric direction, and I was not going to complain about that. Yeah, I wasn't really pleased to see a collaborating credit with Julia Michaels on this self-titled release, but hey, if Shawn Mendes is going in the way of Charlie Puth and tightening up his sound and writing to deliver better quality music, I was willing to give him another chance. So yeah, Shawn Mendes fans, I'm burying the hatchet here. I'm going in with some optimism. After all, he's got nowhere to go but up with me, so what did we get from Shawn Mendes? Well, folks, I'm honestly not sure how much I can really say about this one. And really, if I didn't have any of my infamous history with Shawn Mendes 2 years ago, this would probably be a record that would belong on the trailing edge for me, my wrap-up series at the end of the month. Yes, it's better than Illuminate for pivoting hard out of the dark sourness that permeated too much of that album for more of a sharp acoustic groove style. But by doing so, it only exposes how much Shawn Mendes is chronically in debt to artists who bring a lot more character and flair to this style of music. And while Ed Sheeran is the most obvious comparison point, when he shows up to co-write Fallen All on You with Shawn Mendes, he winds up sounding even more like a cipher behind the microphone. But it's a little bit alarming how little distinctive flair 3 albums in Shawn Mendes has created for himself, which leads to some decently constructed pop songs, but ones that can feel increasingly anonymous with every listen I give them. I mean, they're not bad, but there's not really a lot of good here either. Now, granted, I find it hard to directly blame Shawn Mendes for a lot of this. He's trying to lean into more organic, expressive territory in his delivery, and he's surprisingly credible when he gets groovier production, like on Lost in Japan, which gives him the firmer multi-tracking to carry over that groove. And hell, I'll give him points for at least trying to sell more raw delivery without treading into the plaintive, sour territory I didn't like on previous albums. But let's not mince words. His really tremulous tone definitely pushes it for me, especially in his very shaky falsetto, which quivers on the cusp of breaking, and while it might be appropriate on some of the more romantic or introspective songs, it doesn't really project a lot of confidence for me. And to be fair, Shawn Mendes is making more vulnerable music. That's a good lane for him. He doesn't really need to project a lot of confidence, and doubling down on being the sensitive guy does give him some distinctive character and certainly shows a little bit more maturity. More on this in a bit. But typically, if you're going to go in this lane in a genre like, say, emo, there needs to be a core of catharsis or inner strength, and Shawn Mendes only really seems to have it when he makes slick dance floor jams. I'd say I appreciate the irony of that, but it also seems like a bit of a shame the record can't make the intimate moments hit harder for me just in terms of his vocal delivery. Now, granted, some of that does play into the writing, and let me give Shawn Mendes some more real credit here. This album pivots hard away from the emotionally manipulative but really basic as hell content that irked me so much about Illuminate. Oh, it's just as nakedly sentimental here, but maybe a little bit more maturity and some introspection cleared up some of the darker clouds, because the writing feels generally sharper across the board. Take Where Were You in the Morning, a post-hookup song where the girl will take off in the morning without breakfast, which could have very easily and very quickly felt kind of sour or bitter, but Shawn Mendes plays it with more dejected confusion here, at least acknowledging that she could have had a good reason for taking off. He's not going to blame her that much, and that sober second thought of consideration is a good tempering impulse and shows him at least trying to show more empathy for his partners, to like what Julia Michaels is thinking on Like to Be You, or the relationship that might need to be severed naturally on Mutual, one of the better songs here, or even trying to push past the pettiness of Because I Had You, where she's moved on after he dumped her, and he needs to be able to reconcile that she's moved on and doesn't want him anymore. And now, admittedly, that song gets a shade too close to jealous petulance for my taste, as is the Kiss Off of Queen, which I liked a lot better when it was sung by Charlie Puth and called Attention, but those are definitely the minority in comparison to, let's say, the sweeter hookups like Lost in Japan, or Particular Taste, which I liked a fair bit too. Although I will say that When You're Ready plays a little bit too hard into waiting for a girl for 10 years to come around, when the smarter step would be just to move on for himself and not put himself in that position. So okay, fine. There are definitely enough moments where Shawn Mendes should step up and show a little bit more maturity, but overall, the tone of his writing is a little more measured. It steps in the right direction, but that might be more because the writing doesn't also have a lot of detail or flair to it. I mentioned Ed Sheeran on Fallen All In You because at least he's got a distinctive cadence and style to his poetry, where Shawn Mendes just doesn't really get there yet in terms of a lot of the lines and symbolism and metaphor he uses, almost demanding more detail to flesh out the stories here. It's one reason I'm also a little more forgiving of songs like Youth and In My Blood, which I've talked about on Billboard Breakdown already, because not only do they feel more outside of the relationships he describes on the album, but delve into different points of personal introspection, both about his anxiety and the increased targeting of youth bucking and hardening against more tragedy, and that they shouldn't take his youth away, and his chemistry with Khalid is pretty good. Now granted, Shawn Mendes building more personality is not really helped by the production and instrumentation here, where once again his main collaborator is Teddy Geiger, and if there are issues that persist from Illuminate, they are here. I mean, the fact that for as much as Lost in Japan plays off some piano keys, synthesizers, and a pretty slick Justin Timberlake-esque bass groove, it's really the exception that picks up a lot more character and color compared to the desaturated liquid guitars, the overly stiff and programmed drum machines or hand claps, even a general overemphasis on percussion as a whole. And it's particularly frustrating here because with the more liquid bass definition on a lot of these songs, you wish the mixes picked up more melody beyond just the vocal line or a little bit more sinuous groove. Take Nervous or Particular Taste, where they're really solid main grooves, but the bass and guitar melodies, they feel starved out for more color and emphasis and attention to balance out the drums and drum machines right at the front of the mix, or at least seem like more than just squealing fragments to drive any sort of melody here. There's not a lot of tune to these songs. And then when you get tracks like Where Were You in the Morning that have less groove overall and a little bit more watery melody, but then we get a very stiff, thin bit of percussion that seems to be a lot more dominant in the mix overall. And then you get the tunes like Fallen All In You or Because I Had You that build their foundation in such brittle liquid guitar grooves that have so little color that they just bleed into the background. They're not that interesting. Hell, at least Mutual lets its sharper groove kick into the noisier percussion in the deeper mix that doesn't drown itself out in reverb like Why or the dreariness of Perfectly Wrong and When You're Ready. And it's hard to escape the feeling that many of these instrumental pickups almost feel uncomfortably intimate. Perhaps not a great idea when Shawn Mendes can struggle to show more personality beyond the brittle acoustics and rarely ever ramps up the tempos or the energy. Hell, for as conversational as Like to Be You feels between Shawn Mendes and Julia Michaels, I'm not a fan of either of their voices, but they got decent chemistry. The much more defined presence on that song is John Mayer, who produced and played lead guitar on the song. I might not like the flat, muffled tone of the guitar overall, but John Mayer has enough control of the atmosphere to make it his own song, even from behind the boards, more than that of Shawn Mendes. And that's kind of a frustrating thing about this self-titled release. There are fragments of Shawn Mendes who is more mature and interesting and fun as an artist, who can lean into the grooves and make solid acoustic pop music. But while this is an improvement over Illuminate for me, it feels kind of sadly hollow. There's very little to the performances I find all that gripping, the writing can feel really thin, and the production has no real flair or warmth to cultivate the intimacy that seems determined to try and emphasize even when it shouldn't. And as such, it just leaves me kind of cold overall. I'm just kind of indifferent. So I'm giving it a solid 5 out of 10 and only really recommended for the fans. And really, the comment section's down there. Go nuts. Have fun. I know you're gonna hate me. But beyond that, indifference is better than actively disliking it, I guess. So if that's your thing, might as well enjoy it. Check it out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I'd like to like and subscribe. I'd be more than grateful. Folks, I'm not that angry this time around. No need to knock this up to 1,000 dislikes like last time, but hey, that was a fun review, wasn't it? But hey, I got the poll up there. I'm curious where you guys fall on it. Beyond that, if you guys want to buy the record, links down there below. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to help get involved to support this channel or potentially help impact my schedule, link to my Patreon is right over there. Or 3 times a week, you guys get to vote on my schedule. And once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. Want to see a schedule? It's down there on my Instagram, down link in the description below. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.